Hello everyone and welcome to the 1515 video podcast. I'm Chris Capewell. I'm the global head of the regulatory and financial services team here at Maples. Delighted to have Michelle and Joe, who are both on the screen with me. Michelle Bailey is the senior vice president at Maples FS, and Joe is a senior associate in the regulatory team here with me at Maples. Welcome Joe and welcome Michelle. Michelle in particular, I think this might be your first one on video. So let's see how we go with that. For everybody listening, obviously this doesn't constitute legal advice and needs to be taken as a general update only. And as always, please don't forget to subscribe to us on Apple Podcast and Spotify. Michelle, as the guest of honor, probably easiest to start with you if we can. Can we just have a quick chat around CRS and FATCA? I know that we've got some important reporting deadlines coming up, but it'd be good if you could give everyone a reminder on those deadlines, and then also, I guess, everything that you're seeing by way of update from DITC that might impact on those reporting.
Thanks, Chris. Thanks very much for the introduction, and thank you for having me join you this month. As you mentioned, we have some big deadlines coming up. We've got the FATCA and CRS reporting deadlines are 31st of July for the Cayman entities, and of course the compliance form deadline, that's mid-September, 15th of September. So just in relation to the DITC's activities, they're continuing to compare entities that have been registered on the Cayman portal with those that are registered on the IRS's GIN list, as well as CIMA regulated entities and entities registered on the general registry. And they will issue missing registration notices where they are not seeing those entities registered on the portal. And we're also now seeing breach notices with significant penalties being issued where they've previously sent out a missing notice, a missing registration notice, and it hasn't been actioned. And some of those notices or penalty notices that we're seeing have significant penalties of up to $20,000 per breach, and some notices that actually have more than one breach in them. In relation to general reminders, and just in terms of information that's required to be reported, for CRS individual reportable accounts, the date of birth and the place of birth is required to be reported now, because in Cayman the DITC considers that this information is required to be obtained for AML purposes, and as such should be included in the FI's records and therefore included in your CRS reporting. And talking about due diligence on account holders and self-certification forms, they should be obtained for all account holders, both entities and individuals, as well, including those that are reporting financial institutions themselves. The OECD's view and the DITC's view is that validating the GIN to the IRS website alone is not enough to accept an entity as a reporting financial institution. As we have found, or as they've found over the past few years, that many entities were obtaining a GIN but not doing any further compliance or reporting. So reliance should not be placed solely on an entity being on the GIN list. And just one additional point to note in relation to due diligence on account holders. Additional review should be taken when new documentation is obtained by way of KYC refresh, for example, or if that investor is providing additional subscription documents for a subsequent subscription, or if there's been a change of address. It is important that while the self-certification form does not expire per se, it is actually an ongoing review that's required when there is new information that becomes available. And that should be compared to existing information and documentation to see if there has in fact been a change of circumstance. If there has been a change in circumstance, then the existing self-certification form can no longer be relied upon and a new one must be obtained. And one final comment is really just in relation to what's going to potentially happen after the reporting deadline. We have seen in the past, and we expect it to happen again, the DITC issuing missed reporting notices for those entities that have been registered on the portal, but they have not filed anything for 2024. And maybe the reason is a timing issue in that the financial institution didn't actually become a financial institution until 2025. If that's the case, then it's a simple explanation will be required to clarify that with the DOTC. That's pretty much it. Thanks very much, Chris.
Well, you're not done yet. You're still on. Thanks, Michelle. That was detailed. Just quick, I guess, observation from mine that we've talked about offline is just that you now have place of birth in addition to date of birth. You now also have, in addition to breach notices, penalty notices being issued, and then we also have constantly the participating jurisdiction list being updated. So I think that all goes to the point that we had on our last podcast last month, where someone was talking about corporate governance frameworks and just the need to keep the policies and procedures dynamic and active document. This isn't the case that you just get a policy and procedure and just tuck it away in the drawer. This needs to be an evolving document, and then also needs to be one that you're implementing effectively. So I guess on your side, are you seeing questions around policies and procedures, and on the FS side in terms of how do you go with your policies and procedures? Are you actively updating them?
Yeah, absolutely. We are starting to get more questions around that, and I think we will see more of that going forward once the DOT starts doing the more comprehensive reviews. It's not necessarily the policies and procedures that need to constantly change. It's your actions around them, and just remembering that what any one account holder, while the self-cert was fine, 4 years ago, 5 years ago, it may not be as accurate now because things change.
Yep. Yeah. Okay. All right. Well, you can hang on, Michelle, whilst we talk about other items. Joe, we've talked extensively just now about the CRS and the reporting and the upcoming reporting 31 July in particular. Unfortunately, that's not it for the clients. And we do have other reports / surveys that are due at different periods in the year. I think this month, June, is for banks, and then July is for other types of entities, including SIBA RPs. Do you want to give us a quick update in terms of where we're at with the AML surveys for SIBA RPs, and then also some of the on-site inspection findings from CIMA that they recently talked about in their circular? That would be awesome. Thanks, Joe.
Absolutely. Thanks, Chris. Before I get started, I thought it would be helpful to provide a quick refresher on the regulatory compliance obligations of a SIBA registered person, which I'll refer to as a SIBA RP. So while some of the ongoing obligations of SIBA RPs are lighter touch when compared with entities that are licensed under SIBA, SIBA RPs are subject to the Cayman AML regime, and they are required to comply with CIMA's rules and statements of guidance on corporate governance, internal controls, outsourcing, cybersecurity, and records retention. And so as a result of that, they're required to adopt, implement, and maintain various written policies and procedures, as well as documented risk assessments and compliance logs. So that sets the scene, so to speak, in terms of a SIBA RP's regulatory compliance obligations. So now we're going to have a look at how CIMA polices those compliance obligations, and it does that through the annual AML surveys and its inspection programs. So starting with the AML survey, so CIMA has issued the 2025 annual AML surveys for SIBA RPs, and they did that on the 1st of June. So the surveys are typically distributed to the SIBA RP's AML Co, the MLRO, the Registered Office Service Provider, and its principal contacts based on CIMA's records. So if you're responsible for a SIBA RP and you've not received an email from CIMA as yet about the AML survey, we would recommend reaching out to CIMA, and we've included the relevant email address on the slides. This year's survey questions are similar to last year's, although there are some subtle differences, so it's not possible to simply resubmit responses from the 2024 surveys. CIMA has published an updated completion guide for the AML survey, and we've also included a link to that in the slides. Now, the majority of the questions in the survey are business-specific and factual, and they need to be completed with input from the SIBA RP's AML Co. The survey is due by the 30th of July this year, so you still have a bit of time.
And Joe, I know that you're often busy with the surveys. Is that something that we can complete on behalf of clients, or are we just providing legal advice in relation to it?
Yeah, no, unfortunately, we can't help complete the survey for clients. Surveys can only be completed online by a relevant recipient via the link contained in CIMA's email, but we can, of course, assist with advice on how to complete the survey, and we can also review draft responses. Okay, so that's the AML survey. So now moving on to CIMA's Supervisory Information Circular. As I mentioned before, the other way that CIMA monitors SIBA RPs is through its ongoing inspection program. And from 2020 to March 2024, CIMA has inspected nearly 200 SIBA RPs. So CIMA's inspection process is typically detailed and it runs for several months. So CIMA will inspect a SIBA RP's records, including its written policies and procedures, its risk assessments, and its compliance logs. And it will interview the SIBA RP's directors, senior management, and AML officers. Any breach or deficiency in compliance will be included in CIMA's inspection report, and the SIBA RP will be required to take remedial action within a set time frame. And CIMA can also look to take enforcement action. Now, CIMA has recently published a Supervisory Information Circular setting out key findings from its on-site inspections of 113 SIBA RPs from the 1st of January 2022 to the 31st of March 2024. Now, the circular indicates that while CIMA has observed improvements in compliance by SIBA RPs since January 2022, improvements weren't seen in relation to documentation of customer due diligence and ongoing monitoring, and also the establishment and maintenance of an independent AML audit function. CIMA noted particular weaknesses in the following areas relating to customer due diligence, and that was sanction screening documentation, risk assessment documentation, and also missing or inadequate identification and verification documentation. So the key findings are helpful because they give a good indication of CIMA's potential focus areas for future inspections, and they give SIBA RPs the opportunity to get on the front foot and address any weaknesses in their compliance arrangements now. And this is especially important because if you try to put policies and procedures in place once an inspection has begun, this will be too late for the period under inspection.
Joe, just a quick one and a shameless plug from me. Are you able to just specify how we can help clients with their SIBA compliance obligations?
So Maples has extensive experience in advising on and assisting SIBA RPs with both CIMA's annual AML survey and with CIMA's inspection and remediation processes. And as a result, we've developed a SIBA compliance manual which contains all of the written policies and procedures as well as documented risk assessments and compliance logs that a SIBA RP needs to comply with in order to meet their regulatory compliance obligations, and importantly, also to demonstrate their compliance to CIMA. So please do reach out if you need any assistance in helping you to meet your SIBA RP compliance obligations. And that was all from me.
Okay, perfect. Thanks, Joe. I guess it's par for the course now, and I'll have a quick overview on this, but it is par for the course that on all of these podcasts we seem to be talking about virtual assets. And there's been some good news, actually. So on 28th of May, Cayman Islands government did publish the Virtual Asset Service Providers Amendment Bill 2025. Broadly, the main purpose of that bill is to amend the definition of issuance of virtual assets or a virtual assets issuance. The precise wording is that will now mean the sale of newly created virtual assets to the public in or from within the Cayman Islands in exchange for fiat currency, other virtual assets, or other consideration. So the overall purpose of these amendments are to clarify the issuing concern that we had, particularly around tokenized funds, as to where they would fall in terms of how they were regulated. These amendments, once they come into law, will make it clear that tokenized funds will be subject to the Mutual Funds Law or the Private Funds Act, as the case may require, rather than the concerns we had around VASP. So that is a really good amendment, and we are seeing lots of activity at the moment in the market around digital assets and tokenized funds. One important point to be aware of for this, and it's a key one, is that the new definition that we've just discussed will take effect for tokenization of equity interests and investment interests that have occurred prior to the commencement of the Virtual Asset Service Providers Act. We also have another update from CIMA. They've published an updated regulatory policy on licensing and registration of virtual asset service providers. Do have a read of that. It's fairly extensive, but there's some really good points in there, particularly around some guidance for seeking waivers from the requirement to register or license under the VASP Act. And there's also more detailed guidance on the procedural requirements for registration and licensing in general. So definitely have a look at that. Also, just be aware of the bill and when that comes into law, because they're both key developments under VASP. So Michelle and Joe, that actually concludes it for today. I think we're just around roundabout time. So thank you very much for taking the time to dial in. And Michelle, thanks very much for going on video for the first time on the podcast. We'll have you on in another couple of months if you're happy to attend. And for everyone that's listening and dialed in, thank you very much as always. And we will see you next month. Thank you.